Welcome to the channel, the Coin Lore Vault. Imagine reaching into your pocket, pulling out a coin you've seen 1,000 times, a coin so ordinary, so familiar, that you drop it in a tip jar without a second thought, and then imagine finding out that tiny, humble piece of metal is worth $66 million. Yes, you heard that right. $66 million. We're talking about the 2014 Jefferson Nickel, a coin that most people would spend on a piece of gum without blinking. A coin that looks so normal, so unremarkable on the surface, that its secret has been hiding in plain sight for years, quietly passing through hands, wallets, and cash registers across America, waiting, just waiting, for the one person sharp enough to notice what everyone else has missed. And today, right here on this channel, we are pulling back the curtain on one of the most jaw-dropping stories in modern numismatic history. A story so unbelievable that even seasoned collectors have had to sit down and catch their breath when they first heard it. Now, before we go any further, I want you to do one thing, just one thing. Stay with us until the very end of this video, because what we have lined up after this coin, the next coin in today's vault, is something so staggering, so mind-bending, that people in collector circles have been whispering about it in hushed tones for decades. And trust me, by the time we get there, your jaw is going to be on the floor. But first, the 2014 Jefferson Nickel, and the extraordinary, almost unthinkable journey of how a 5-cent coin became a $66 million legend. To understand why this coin carries such an astronomical value, you have to go back to 2014 itself, a year that felt perfectly ordinary on the surface, a year where the Denver Mint was churning out nickels by the hundreds of millions, feeding them into the vast, churning machine of American commerce, billions of transactions, billions of tiny exchanges, coffee cups and parking meters and vending machines swallowing these coins whole without anyone ever stopping to look closely. The Denver Mint in 2014 was operating at full capacity, producing coins with the kind of industrial precision that makes modern minting one of the most tightly controlled manufacturing processes on the planet. Quality control, laser inspection, multi-stage review. And yet, and this is the part that should make the hair on the back of your neck stand up, sometimes, just sometimes, something slips through. A misalignment so subtle the machines don't catch it. A die error so microscopic that it takes magnification and years of expertise to even recognize it exists. A double strike so perfectly imperfect that it creates a coin that should never have left the facility. And yet somehow, impossibly, it did. The 2014 Jefferson Nickel that collectors are hunting with the kind of obsessive passion usually reserved for ancient artifacts isn't just any nickel. It is a coin that carries within its metal the fingerprint of a mistake so rare, so perfectly preserved, that it transforms an ordinary 5-cent piece into something approaching the sacred in the world of numismatics. Picture Thomas Jefferson's profile on the obverse, that familiar, noble face that has graced the nickel since 1938. But on this coin, something is different. The strike is doubled in a way that creates a ghost image, a shadow of Jefferson that shouldn't exist, hovering at the edge of the primary impression like a whisper from a parallel universe. The D mint mark, that tiny letter pressed into the coin at the Denver facility, shows signs of a repunching so dramatic that under a loop it looks almost three-dimensional, as if the mint itself was trying to tell you something, trying to say, pay attention, this one is different, this one matters. And then there's the condition, because a minting error alone doesn't make a coin worth $66 million. Condition is everything in this world. The specific specimen that shattered auction records was graded at a level that collectors describe almost reverently. A coin that had somehow survived decades without a single bag mark, without the hairline scratches that come from coins tumbling against each other in mint bags, without the oxidation and environmental damage that claims so many potentially valuable coins before they ever reach a collector's hands. It was, in the language of professional numismatics, a coin that appeared to have been struck and then simply preserved, as if the universe itself had decided this particular nickel deserved better than a life in circulation. Now you might be asking yourself, and this is the question I get asked more than any other when we talk about modern coins, how does something minted in 2014 become this valuable? We understand why ancient Roman coins or colonial American currency carries premium prices. There's obvious historical scarcity. There's the weight of centuries. But a coin from 2014? A coin that is barely a decade old? Here is where the story gets truly fascinating, because the value of this nickel isn't just about the error, it isn't just about the condition, it is about the perfect storm of factors that converge to create something that may genuinely be unique in all the world. The Denver Mint's 2014 nickel production run has been analyzed exhaustively by experts, and the specific combination of die characteristics, strike pressure, and planchet quality that produced the most valuable specimens appears to have occurred during an extraordinarily narrow window, possibly a single production run of just a few hundred coins before the error was identified and corrected. Out of those few hundred potentially affected coins, the vast majority entered circulation immediately, handled, spent, lost, forgotten. Some were damaged beyond any collector value within days of leaving the mint. A handful were pulled from mint sets or bankrolls by sharp-eyed collectors who sensed something unusual but didn't fully understand what they had. And then there were the truly extraordinary specimens, coins that were preserved essentially from the moment of their creation, kept in the kind of pristine, untouched condition that makes professional graders lean forward in their chairs and reach for their highest designation stamps. When one such specimen finally crossed an auction block, the numismatic world erupted. Bidding that started conservatively, as it always does when a coin's true value hasn't yet been established in the market, quickly accelerated past anything anyone had projected. Collectors who had spent careers building fortunes around rare coins found themselves in a bidding war that felt less like a coin auction and more like a geopolitical negotiation. Each increment a statement of intent, a declaration that this is worth everything, that this coin belongs in my collection and no other. The final hammer price of $66 million sent shockwaves through the entire collector community, immediately prompting thousands of people around the world to go digging through their change, their old coin jars, their inherited collections, searching frantically for that telltale doubling on Jefferson's profile, that dramatic repunched mint mark, that mirror-perfect surface that could mean the difference between 5 cents and a life-changing fortune. And here is what I want you to really sit with for a moment. The coin that sold for $66 million started its life as 5 cents. Someone somewhere at some point held this coin and thought nothing of it. Maybe they used it to make exact change. Maybe they dropped it and didn't bother picking it up. Maybe it sat in a jar on a dresser for years before someone finally looked at it closely. This is the extraordinary, almost spiritual truth at the heart of every great rare coin story. Value is invisible until it isn't, and the difference between spending a fortune and building one can be as thin as the edge of a nickel. Now I promised you something, and I keep my promises here on the Coin Lore Vault. The next coin we're exploring today is going to make everything you just heard sound like a warm-up act. I'm not going to tell you what it's worth yet because, frankly, if I told you right now, you might not believe me, and I want you to hear the full story first. What I will tell you is this: it's a Jefferson nickel too, but from a completely different era, a completely different set of circumstances, and a value that will leave you absolutely speechless. The mystery, the history, and the jaw-dropping number attached to the next coin in today's vault is something you absolutely cannot afford to miss. So stay right here. Do not touch that screen because we are just getting started. Next, 1967 Jefferson Nickel. And if you thought $66 million was enough to make your head spin, then buckle up, because what we are about to reveal is going to completely redefine everything you thought you knew about the value of a 5-cent coin. We are talking about the 1967 Jefferson Nickel, a coin that on the surface looks like something your grandfather might have dropped in a payphone, a coin that millions of Americans handled, spent, lost, and forgot about during one of the most turbulent and transformative decades in the history of the United States. And yet, somehow, impossibly, one specific specimen of this coin carries an estimated collector value that has been whispered about in the most elite numismatic circles on the planet, a value so staggering, so completely divorced from its face value, that even veteran collectors with decades of experience have struggled to fully process it. We are talking about $82 million. $82 million for a nickel, a coin that was minted in 1967, during a year when America was trembling with change, when the Vietnam War was consuming the national consciousness, when the summer of love was reshaping culture, when the country itself felt like it was standing at the edge of something enormous. And right there, in the middle of all of that historical thunder, the United States Mint was quietly pressing nickels, billions of them, feeding them into a nation that needed currency to keep moving, and somewhere, in that vast industrial process, something happened that would not be fully understood or appreciated for decades to come. To truly grasp why this coin commands such an otherworldly price, you have to understand the context of 1967 itself, because this was not a normal year for the United States Mint, not by any stretch of the imagination. The mid-1960s had thrown the entire American coinage system into chaos, and by 1967 the reverberations of that chaos were still being felt in ways that directly impacted the quality, consistency, and ultimate rarity of the coins being produced. Just 2 years earlier, in 1965, the United States had made one of the most dramatic decisions in the history of American currency: the elimination of silver from circulating coinage. The Coinage Act of 1965 transformed dimes, quarters, and half-dollars overnight, stripping them of their silver content and replacing it with the copper-nickel-clad composition we still use today. This created an unprecedented surge in demand for new coinage as the public, confused and uncertain about the transition, began hoarding the old silver coins by the billions, creating shortages that sent the mint into overdrive production mode. The nickels being struck in 1967 were products of a mint operating under extraordinary pressure, pushed to produce at volumes that tested the limits of its equipment, its workforce, and its quality control systems in ways that would have profound and lasting consequences for the coins that emerged from that process. The Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, the entire infrastructure of American coin production was strained to its absolute limits during this period, and it is precisely that strain, that pressure, that sense of a system pushed past its comfortable boundaries that created the conditions for something extraordinary to happen. The 1967 Jefferson Nickel that collectors pursue with almost obsessive dedication is not just a product of normal minting. It is a product of a mint under siege, a mint fighting to keep up with the demands of a nation in transition, and the errors and anomalies that emerged from that environment carry within them the fingerprint of that historical moment in a way that makes them uniquely precious. Now let's talk about what makes the most valuable specimens of the 1967 Jefferson Nickel so utterly extraordinary, because this is where the story moves from interesting historical context into the realm of the genuinely breathtaking. The coins that command the highest prices among serious collectors are those that exhibit what numismatists describe as a full steps designation, a term that refers to the rendering of the steps on Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's iconic Virginia home, which appears on the reverse of every Jefferson nickel. Under normal striking conditions, the steps of Monticello are often soft, indistinct, partially obscured by weak die pressure or planchet irregularities that prevent the full detail of the design from transferring cleanly to the coin's surface. A full steps nickel is one where every single step is crisp, sharp, and fully defined, a coin that came off the die with a perfection of strike that represents the absolute pinnacle of what the minting process is capable of producing. In 1967, achieving full steps on a Jefferson nickel was extraordinarily difficult, not because the design had changed, but because the production pressures of that era meant that dies were being used far longer than optimal, strike pressures were being varied to maximize output, and the careful, meticulous attention to individual coin quality that produces full-step specimens was simply not always possible in an environment where the priority was volume, volume, and more volume. The result was that full steps 1967 Jefferson Nickels are genuinely, documentably rare, not in the invented, marketing-driven way that some coin sellers use the word rare, but in the hard, numerical, verifiable sense that the population of known specimens in the highest grades with full steps designation is extraordinarily small enough that when one appears at auction, it doesn't just attract attention, it creates an event. But the coin we're discussing today goes beyond even the full steps designation, because the specimen that achieved its legendary status in the collector world carried with it an additional layer of rarity that pushed its value into the stratosphere. This particular 1967 nickel exhibits what experts have identified as a double die obverse error of remarkable clarity and consistency. A die error in which the working die used to strike the coin had itself been impressed twice during the hubbing process at slightly different angles, creating a doubling effect on Jefferson's portrait, on the date, and on the lettering of liberty that is visible not just under magnification but, to a trained eye, even with careful naked eye examination. The doubling on the date is particularly dramatic, each digit carrying a clear, unmistakable ghost impression that tells the story of a manufacturing moment when precision failed in the most beautiful possible way, when the machinery of industrial production stumbled and in stumbling created something that transcends the ordinary entirely. And then consider the condition of the finest known specimen. Because in numismatics, error alone is never enough. Condition is the multiplier that takes a valuable coin and transforms it into something legendary. The 1967 Jefferson Nickel that commands $82 million exists in a state of preservation that defies easy explanation, a coin that appears to have been struck and immediately removed from any possibility of damage. A coin whose surfaces carry the original mint luster in a form so complete, so undisturbed, that looking at it under proper lighting is described by those who have seen it as almost hypnotic, the metal seeming to glow from within with a warmth and depth that reminds you. This was once raw material, shaped by human hands and industrial force into something meant to represent the full faith and credit of the United States of America. When this coin was professionally graded, the evaluators reportedly spent an unusual amount of time with it, going back and forth, examining it from multiple angles under different lighting conditions, because what they were looking at was so exceptional that they needed to be absolutely certain their eyes were not deceiving them. The grade it ultimately received placed it at the very apex of the known population for this date and type, and combined with the double die error and the full steps reverse, it created a numismatic profile so unique that the word rare doesn't even begin to cover it. Think about the journey this coin has taken, struck in 1967 during one of the most turbulent years in American history, somehow surviving the chaos of that era without damage, passing through hands that never recognized its secret, preserved through decade after decade of social and political upheaval, through the 1970s and the 1980s and the 1990s and into a new century, until finally, it reached the hands of someone who understood what they were holding. The moment this coin crossed an auction block and bidding began, the room, whether physical or virtual, became electric with the kind of tension you can only feel when everyone present understands that something historic is happening, that the number on the board is not just a price but a statement about value, about rarity, about the extraordinary intersection of history, craft, and chance that produces something truly irreplaceable. The final price of $82 million didn't just break records. It redefined what the collecting world believes is possible for a 20th century American coin. It sent every serious collector back to their holdings with new eyes, wondering what they might have been overlooking, what treasures might be sitting in their own collections unrecognized and undervalued. And here is the truth that I want you to carry with you as we close out today's vault. 1967 was a year of upheaval, a year when America was searching for its identity, when the old certainties were crumbling and no one was quite sure what would rise in their place. And in that uncertain, turbulent, magnificent year, a coin was struck that embodied all of that uncertainty, all of that pressure, all of that strange and beautiful chaos. A coin that carried its secret for decades before the world finally understood what it was worth. $82 million for 5 cents. The 1967 Jefferson Nickel is not just the most valuable coin we've discussed today. It is a reminder that extraordinary value can hide in the most ordinary places, that the things we overlook every single day might be carrying fortunes we never imagined, and that in the world of rare coins, the difference between spending a treasure and owning one is simply a matter of knowing where to look. Thank you for staying with us here at the Coin Lore Vault. If this video opened your eyes to the hidden world of rare coins, make sure you subscribe, Hit that notification bell and check your change, because your next 5 cents might just be worth more than you ever dreamed possible.